Colin Powell once said, "There are no secrets to success. It's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure." And we couldn't agree more. This is Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. We'll talk to people from all walks of life and pick their brains about their journey, the process, and the ups and downs to becoming successful. You want inspiration and motivation? It all starts here. This is the Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. And now your host, Kyle Sullivan.
What's going on, champions? Welcome to another episode of Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Mr. Richard Eberle of Eberle Furniture and Design. He is our guest today, and he's got an incredible story of how he got into it, the pathway to do it. He's a husband, a father. He's out of Conway, Arkansas, loves being able to support his family by doing something that he loves and he finds meaningful. Thanks so much for being on the show today, Richard.
Man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I teased a little bit of what you do, but man, talk about who you are behind the bio.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm a husband. I've been married for 8 years to my best friend. I love her so much, and I'm so thankful for her. And her name is Dr. Julie Eberle. She is a chemistry professor at UCA. And then I'm a dad. I have two incredible little kids. I have a 4-year-old little girl and a 2-year-old son, Finley and Joel. And then really, other than that, I'm just a woodworker, a furniture maker. That's really about my life consists of it. It's my wife, my kids, and then pursuing becoming the best furniture maker that I can be.
Awesome, man. And I'm glad you mentioned the kids because yours are 4 and 2, mine are 3 and 1, and there's a daughter and a son. So I'm like, okay, I just need to follow your journey just to see you're a year or so ahead of me. I need to see what's working. And man, so you've not always been, doing this full time woodworking. What was the journey leading up to it? What was the moment that said, okay, I'm going to do this? Let's talk about the backstory a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the last 15 years leading up before I started my business, I had worked with kids. I was a children's pastor and then kind of, for a while, and then met my wife. She got accepted into grad school. And then I was a case manager at an elementary school because my background is social work, child abuse and neglect. And so that was I worked as a case manager in an elementary school, and then did that for 2 years, and then got back into working full time as a middle school pastor at a church in Conway for over around 6 years. And then, so that's got a little bit of like what I was doing prior to doing furniture full time, but I didn't actually go to school to make furniture. I didn't actually discover it until I moved to Fayetteville. When I decided to marry my wife, I was bored looking for jobs. I'm not really a TV watcher or something like that. So I just was like, I'm going to make something one day. And I found a pallet of wood and had no clue what I'm doing, but wanted to make a table. And it took a long time to make. It was pretty rickety, but I was proud of it. And I took a picture and put it online. And the next thing you know, someone was like, "Hey, can I buy that?" And I was like, serious? Like, someone wanted to buy it. And that really just kind of spiraled into just me pursuing, learning how to do this. So for several years I was making, and then ultimately when I was in Conway, when we moved to Conway, I met a man that I bought a tool off of, I think Craigslist from. And I was making a certain style of furniture, just kind of a hobbyist. But as I walked into his house, it was like I had stepped into Fine Woodworking magazine. He's still hands down one of the best furniture makers I've ever met. And it was really inspiring to the point where I just was like, "Do you sell this?" And he said, "No, I don't sell this stuff. I have a job. I build for legacy." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And he was a grandfather who had 16 grandkids, and just kind of talked through that. And his whole process, he would take a tree that someone had cut down and go through the whole process of turning it into lumber, drying it, and then making just like the finest heirloom furniture I'd ever seen. And really, he was my inspiration to say, like, to turn my skill up to another level. And I think sometimes it's like everybody kind of cruises, thinks that they're good at something. And then you meet somebody who's really good at it. And you have one of two options. You can be really insecure and like intimidated, or you can just realize, oh, I have a long ways to go. And I just was like, I wanted to get to know this guy, and we just hit it off. And there was just a long season of life where he was just kind of a mentor and just pushed me to make finer things, learn, just deep dive into this. And really, that's what happened. He mentored me. He would push me to make things out of my comfort zone, answer questions, all these things. And so for several, like 6 years, that's what I did. Like, I didn't sell for people. I didn't make for people. I just really took time to learn the craft. And I mean, it's one of those things you never hit the tape of learning it all, but yeah. And so I just fell in love with it. And then ultimately there just came a point in ministry. There's sometimes at a church, like, people will, work their way up a ladder, or people would say, you'd make a great this or that. And there was nothing wrong with that. But I was coming to a point in life where I realized my time with kids was coming to an end, like working with kids. And I had no aspirations to be like a senior pastor or something else. And then there were just a few other circumstances that led me to dream about, what if I gave this a run? Like, what if I actually gave it a run? And it took me about a year emotionally to like even get there, just because it's really scary. But I just was, through the support. My wife was my biggest cheerleader of like, you've got to give it a run. Like, your work is good. You're not just a hobbyist. Like, you should give this a run. And so through a lot of wise counsel, asking questions, and really then it was just like, do I believe in myself and my work? Am I going to bet on myself? Because I think, here's what I would say about me. I have never been driven by money for what I chose to do. I did ministry. It's not a job, money, a place where you're going to make a lot of money, like as a children's pastor or youth pastor. But I think I've always just chosen what I wanted to do and believed I was supposed to do at the time, and just kind of let the Lord take care of everything else. And it was the same thing with like trying to make fine furniture in a state like Arkansas, where it's not like, we don't have just cities with millions of people that normally can support somebody like that. But I just was like, I'm not going to get to the end of my life and say, what if? I wish I would have tried it. And the other thing I didn't want to do is get to the end of my life, or when my kids get older and they look at me and they have a dream, and I like, you know what? I'm scared. You should go for it. And they look at me like, Dad, did you have a dream? Yeah, but I was too scared to pursue it. And those are just some things I didn't want to look my kids in my face and tell them that. I would rather risk failure and know that I gave it a run. And I didn't want to get to the end of my life and not try to pursue, because you just hear so many older people say, I wish I would have tried this. I was too scared, or this or that. And it's like, I'm just the type that said, if someone older and wiser is saying that to do something like that, well, dadgummit, I'm going to do it. Now, of course, I planned, and I want to make money at this and all this other stuff, but pursuing what I want to do has been the driver that also kind of helped give me the courage to say, let's give this a run. So,
Richard, there's so much that man, I love it. And well, there's so much alignment with you and I, because that was so much of what I started the coaching, consulting, speaking, podcasting, because I knew for me, it was going to be same thing. My kids were going to look at me one day, and I wanted to tell them stories, not theories of taking risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And say, oh, no, let me tell you about when, man, Dad really dropped the ball. Or, man, that thing we went on, it was because Dad did blah, blah, blah. So I love that, man. And
And that's the adventure of life. Like, man, like it's a journey and an adventure, and it's going to have its ups and downs, but that's where character is formed. That's where you mature and grow. And I think, being at home during COVID, even though I was doing my job, I think you also have time to really like just reassess and evaluate like, man, I had a few friends I'm 35 years old. I had a few friends die of cancer that both of them were my age. One was a year older than me and one was a year younger than me. Both of them died for cancer. Healthy people out of nowhere. And so I think some of those things too, like realize like, man, life's short, too short not to pursue something that I want to do and build a life. That's what I'm trying to do, is build a life. And if I want to build furniture, I had to figure out a way to do it to support my family so that I could do what I wanted to do.
I love that, Richard. And something you said that the idea of like heirloom furniture and just the craftsmanship that you put into it. I'll be honest, like I had never even heard of that term. And I know you have to read an article that was written about you. It was like this anti-IKEA. And it convicted me a bit because I'm like, well, so much of our stuff is IKEA right now. I don't know. But talk about the heart behind making a piece that is carried on through generations. Because I remember like growing up, we had stuff that we had gotten from great grandparents and grandparents, but like it's almost like this resurgence of people wanting those things again, where maybe there's maybe a generation or so that maybe that wasn't as important. Talk to that.
Yeah. So just kind of that heirloom furniture, that desire to create something that lasts is not, I think anything that's worth having, it takes time. And so it's doing something that learning skills from the people of old who have done it. And the ways they went about it, that their stuff in Japan, their stuff in, all over the United States that was built in the 1700s, there's stuff in Europe that people made with their hands that are still standing and lasting today. And they've lasted for hundreds of years if kept in like proper conditions. And there's just something about that. Using a material, especially like wood. We're in a time right now where so many urban trees are being cut down. Now, I'm not the type that like just wants to go cut down trees to cut down trees, but we're in a time where like so much of this incredible resources that's beautiful is being just cut, thrown away into the dump, or turned into firewood. And it's like, man, why not do something with that? But then too, it's just a long process, but it's built really well, doing good work, learning, not just throwing something together that looks good, but that's cheaply manufactured overseas very quick, just thinking about the bottom dollar, but also thinking, how is something going to be made and created, not just where it's aesthetically beautiful, but it's also built in a way with knowledge and information that it's going to last, that, you know what, it's not just following a trend, but like, man, your grandkids are going to want to fight over this thing because it's like, man, that was Pawpaw's table, or that was, Meemaw's bed, or whatever, but it was made that they can hand that down through generations. That's what people used to do at times when they would have like as a wedding gift, someone would get like a hope chest built or something that they would put blankets in. And it's like, man, that's been around for decades. Or I recently, not too long ago, redid a table for somebody that it was their grandmother's table that's been in their family for 100 years, or great grandmother's table or something like that. So it was really, really cool. But that's the desire by it, to create beautiful things, not just functional things, but then two, doing it in a way that it's going to cost more on the front end because you're having an artist create it, but knowing too that it's not something you're going to buy and throw away. I mean, the reality is most people look at a table like me and like, man, I can't spend that money on that. But yet they bought over the course of 20 years, 10 trendy things, and it's really been more expensive than buying mine.
Yep.
And it lasting and developing character. And then two, just building memories around it. I'm a family man. I want to build furniture that people are going to be able to build memories around. So.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. And I have used that same logic on much simpler things. I'm like, babe, if I keep this text thing I'm gonna, cost per use type deal. Um, so did I hear? So when you started, you met the guy, bought the tool, started learning and growing. How long was it before you sold your first like piece? You said
Well,
was it 6 years that you were learning under him?
yeah, well, and I mean, by learning, I wasn't going to school, but it was just a guy that I would go to the garage, spend time with
Yeah.
him. I was like, and I was just continuing to self-educate, like through
Yep.
fine woodworking magazines, another website called Lost Art Press that has just these incredible books of master craftsmen, and then of course YouTube. But yeah, I would say before I launched my business, I would make periodically things on the side for people. Just to be able to purchase a tool or do something that I wanted. But for the most part, I was building stuff for my own home, like learning, like challenging myself, building beds and cribs and tables and all these other stuff and trying to do it in a way, the right way. So, I mean, honestly, it was almost a 9-year journey from when I started woodworking before I launched my business. I wanted to start really like do a business early on, but I read a book called Quitter, and it was probably the best book that I read for me because I was green, excited, ambitious, but I just hadn't developed the skills that I needed to. It would have failed and flopped. And there's a pastor out of Oklahoma who had a saying that I've never forgotten that I really applied to like woodworking and everything else. He says, you overestimate what you can do in a year, and you underestimate what you can do in 5 to 10 years. And because so many people want to start doing stuff, but man, when you start selling it to people for real money, like you can get over your head really quickly, or you get discouraged because they ask you to do something that you just can't pull off. And so for me, it was like, just spend time really learning and honing my skills in the dark, really, with my home, experiment, fail a lot at home. That way it gave me the confidence to say, okay, I've still got a lot to learn, and there's still things that are still out of my scope of doing that I'm pushing towards. But yeah, almost 9 years before I started my business to do what I'm doing.
Everybody listening, go back and listen to the last 90 seconds because that's incredibly important, man, to acknowledge like, man, it was almost 9 years before from, hey, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to learn. I'm going to fail. I'm going to mistake. I'm going to go in this guy's garage. I'm going to look, I'm going to self-educate. I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn. 9 years. Most people can't last 9 months doing something. And so that speaks in and of itself to the commitment level, the resiliency to doing something that, man, it's that consistency over time. And I love that quote as well, that we overestimate what we can do in the short term. We underestimate what we can do in a lifetime of faithfulness.
Yep.
And so I love that, man. Do you have a favorite thing that you like to build?
Man, I love making beds. Like, I think I've made 2 cribs have been some of my favorite things to do. I love I just like creating, honestly. I'm working on a desk right now for a guy, probably the best clients I've ever had, actually. One of those things. There's a book that I would recommend everybody or whoever's like thinking about starting a business, or not even starting a business, just chasing a dream. Your dream doesn't have to be an entrepreneur. It could be your dreams to be a nurse. Go be a nurse. Like and that was another part of that guy. His name is Rick, who he's not just played a role in me learning furniture, but part of his story was he was a businessman climbing the business ladder and hated his life. And he wanted to do something, and he wanted to be a physical therapist. He was 30 years old, had set like 3 or 4 kids. And he told his wife that he wanted to be a physical therapist, but it was going to take 4 years. And so that's just a lot. I'll be 34 years old by the time that I'm done with school. And she looked at him and said, well, how old will you be in 4 years if you don't go back to school? And so it's like, and so for me, all that to be said, whatever your dream is, to pursue it, whether it's to be an entrepreneur or that. But a book that I read was called When to Jump. And it was, I forgot the name of the author. It's When to Jump, When to Leap, When to Jump, something like that. I'll send it to you. But it wasn't so much like the how-to guide, because there's no exact how-to way, man. You're going to fail and there's so many things. But it was like the emotional support and courage that I needed to like ramp up to do what I launched out to do. I don't remember your question. Oh, what was my favorite thing to build? But I don't know. I love tables. I love beds. The thing that I really want to learn, and I have a vision for where I want to see my business in 15 to 20 years. And there's just going to be steps to get there. But ultimately, I would love to be like a master chair maker, to be able to make not only beautiful chairs, but comfortable chairs. A beautiful and comfortable chair is one of the hardest things to make. So,
man, come on. What? Okay, I'm curious. Why is that?
Because it's such a functional piece, and there's oftentimes curves, and you got to think about the body ergonomics of people. And oftentimes you're dealing with weird angles. And how do you make something comfortable that a guy like me who's like 5'7" sits in, but then also someone who's like 6'4" can sit in, and it be comfortable and support? Like when you sit in a good chair that supports your lower lumbar and all this other stuff, like it's a game changer. You don't realize honestly how often you sit in bad chairs until you sit in one good one and you're like, holy cow. So yeah, a really nice wooden chair. And I want like rocking chairs and stuff like that. Those are things I want to be able to do one day. So
man, I love that. And there's so much intentionality to what you do, even in what you've done before you launched the business, how you view it. Man, and talk about how did the state pieces start, like the tables that I saw? Because I mean, y'all, we're going to link his website. Go look at it. Go look at the pictures. But like, dude, that's some intricate work. How did that get started?
I just had never really seen a table in like the shape of Arkansas or Texas or like Louisiana. And I wanted to do it. And like early on, when I first started even making out of pallets, I would make kind of the rough shape. But then I just kept, again, it was just, how do I keep never settling for where I was, and push and push and push and push and push to make better and better and better. And like the most recent, to be able to get it the exact way, I don't use like a CNC computerized machine. But there's a guy who's a furniture maker that I really look up to in California. He makes these beautiful California desks, but he was making them out of really thick pieces of wood, which are really hard you can't cut out with a jigsaw or something else. I'm like, how does he make that? And it took me about 6 months to figure out how he was doing it. And then two, doom scrolling probably like back to 2011 to like his very first, Instagram post, and never showing his process, but like studying and putting pieces together, and then just kind of figuring out, and then trying that to do Arkansas, how intricate Arkansas is, and Louisiana, and some of that other stuff. So yeah, that's how that came about. And I just think they're cool statement pieces. Like I think they could be in a duck lodge, to a bank, to a home, to like a game room. I just auctioned off a Razorback shaped table at a big cancer fundraiser. They reached out to me, did that, and it was like the highest bid piece there, I think. And then also the University of Arkansas reached out to me for a big scholarship fundraiser they did, and I donated an Arkansas shaped table for it, and it's pretty cool. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, definitely go and look at them. Definitely go and look at the pieces. I think you have some folks reached out in Oklahoma as soon as this drops, man, because what you do is really incredible. And I'm even more impressed with the path that you've gotten to this point. And that's what we all love, right? It's the story leading up to the success we're having now. And so Richard, where can people find you online? Where can they see more of what you're doing and contact you?
Yeah, well, I'm on social, like Instagram and Facebook. I have like a YouTube channel that I post it mainly started off with me doing like sawmilling stuff, but now I'm starting to just time lapse builds for clients and let them see that. So I've got a lot of those coming up, so you can find me there. But then my website is richardeberlefurniture.com. That has links to everything else, but that's how people can order. That's how they can really see my portfolio, answer questions, all that stuff is found there.
Awesome. We'll link all that in the show notes. Richard, thanks so much for being on the show. Before we let you go, I feel like I know the answer to this question, but at an Unleash the Champ leadership podcast, we want to know, what does it mean to be a champion to you?
Man, it's the person who doesn't quit. Like, you just got to have grit, and you got to be teachable, and find a dream or something that you want to pursue and then go after it. And when you get knocked down, you got to get back up. And it's the person who has grit and doesn't quit.
Has grit, doesn't quit. Richard, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Man, thank you.
You've been listening to the Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Our passion is to talk to successful people and hear all about their journey and what it took to get there. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit up the website at unleashthechamp.com. Find us on Instagram at Kyle J. Sullivan and hit up that Facebook page at Unleash the Champ. Remember, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving.